Gather around, one and all, as we celebrate the magic of women in cinema at our Film Coven. We're your hosts, Kelli Mehan
and Melissa Woody, and today we're going to be discussing screwball comedies. So before this episode, Kelli and I decided that we would at least, at the minimum, watch It Happened One Night, Bringing Up Baby, and My Man Godfrey. We might talk about some other films along the way too, but we agreed let's watch those. Those are staples in this genre. But Kelli, this was your idea today. I'm just curious, where did you get this idea and how are you feeling today?
Well, if it hasn't been made apparent on this show so far, I love the classics. That is just my go-to. I tend to do it at the end of every year, like I'll binge ones that I haven't seen, or I really had this big breakthrough about 5 or 6 years ago where it's like, I haven't seen any of these and actively seeked it out. And screwball comedies is one of those terms I feel like gets thrown around, but I really hadn't seen the thing. So absolutely, my first time watches for all these was in the last 5 years or so, and they've become, well, two have become staples that I really like. One I'm iffy on, but yes, we sort of agreed, like, for reference or for citation purposes, like, let's go with these three. As you sort of said, they are really high up there. I think the first one I would have seen would have been It Happened One Night when I was going through AFI, and it is definitely one of those ones, as you said, is so revered. It swept the Oscars. I think if you're a fan of movies and cinema, I think you really like this one, or it's one that you've just got to watch. You've got to watch it for your own personal knowledge. Melissa, how did you come to screwball comedies?
At a very young age, I have a foggy memory, like I don't really remember the specifics of it, but I have a foggy memory of watching Bringing Up Baby with my grandma, because my grandma's a big film lover, and I watched a lot of classics kind of with her when I was a child. So I do remember kind of watching that one. Very similar to you, I've watched a lot of classics or ones that I haven't seen before in the past 5 years or so. I really like classics, but it's not necessarily something I maybe gravitated towards before I joined this kind of movie community online. Now I definitely have an appreciation for them, and it's something I gravitate towards. But 5 years ago, before that, I wasn't really seeking out classics, but it's something I've really come to love. I agree with It Happened One Night. That's definitely a classic just in film history, regardless of screwball comedies. And it's celebrating 90 years this year.
Beautiful. This is one of those subgenres I was sort of thinking, and it's just one of those ones that really sticks out in my brain as having great examples and some of the earliest subgenres of comedy, because we got, I would say, a lot of silent film, and that's obviously taking from a lot of vaudeville and a lot of stage and really dramatic and all that sort of thing. But screwball comedies was really of the time and sits in the period. Is there anything of the genre that you really like or are sort of gravitating towards?
I think something, especially preparing for this episode and rewatching these films kind of through the lens of the show of a female perspective, is we get some really strong, confident female characters and just memorable female characters, which in the history of cinema, we've come a long way, but I think this genre in a way kind of empowered women through humor. So that was definitely something I kind of took away from these rewatches and just thinking about the impact of screwball comedies. What is some things that you like about this genre?
I like the lightness and I like the dialogue. Screwball comedies to me is fast-paced, witty dialogue. That's what it sums up to me. But then also that is paired with these absolute out-of-the-box situations. There's always a misunderstanding. There's always a telephone game of for Simpsons references, like Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
You know, I heard Skinner say the teachers will crack any minute.
Skinner said the teachers will crack any minute. Purple Monkey Dishwasher.
Well, we'll show him, especially for that Purple Monkey Dishwasher remark.
There's always something where someone said one thing and it's misinterpreted by someone. I'm so sorry. Mel, just get on board with The Simpsons already. After we've done Drag Race, just enjoy the 80 seasons of The Simpsons and we'll be on it. There's always a misunderstanding, and there's always a lot of physical comedy. And I think that's what I really like with what you're saying about how it empowered women, because I think what it says about women in comedy at the time is that we can be funny and we can lead the movie. And I think of Carole Lombard very much in My Man Godfrey. She does all this physical acting. She does these feints that I think about the end of the movie, you know, where he's like throwing her over the shoulder and she just going limp and in the shower and everything. Godfrey, put me in the shower. That cracks me up. Like, Godfrey loves me, put me in the shower. And just being able to play with tone, and we see a lot of these gender dynamics, and I find that really interesting as well.
Carole Lombard was definitely like a kind of a takeaway from this episode, because I that was a first time watch for me out of the three movies. My Man Godfrey, I had not seen it before, and I loved her and her performance. Like, just kind of this like ditzy character that's like head over heels for Godfrey, and just I love the drama of it all. Like, life is an empty bubble.
Life is but an empty bubble.
Like, she's so extra, like, it's amazing.
Like that whole scene where she's in that like the black like negligee kind of thing, and just
the lace and everything.
Yeah, and just like the way she delivers the lines, that whole scene, like I was living for it. And I definitely like want to seek out more of her films, because that was the only movie I've seen of her, and she does definitely seem like somebody that like was in this genre quite a bit. So I'm kind of interested now to like seek her out and see what other movies she was in kind of in this time period.
Absolutely. She was like the screwball comedy girl is what I sort of know her as, and like almost like what Jim Carrey was to physical comedy in the 90s. That's what I get with Carole Lombard, of this sort of period of being able to headlines, and pigeonholed isn't the right word, but like she definitely made a name for herself, and she was that girl if you were casting a role. I find it really interesting, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about Bringing Up Baby is that we love Katharine Hepburn. We love her, but I find her career so interesting that she kills it in dramas, and she absolutely kills it in comedy as well. She's just one of those actresses that can give you both. And this character that she plays in Bringing Up Baby, when I think of my Katharine Hepburn, I think of Philadelphia Story. That is one of my favorite movies. And I just love her real dry delivery. So when I saw Bringing Up Baby, it was one of the ones I saw later on my AFI Classics watch. So I had seen a fair few of her other, I'd seen like Africa Queen already, and I'd seen, as I sort of said, Philadelphia Story. I think I'd even seen Adam's Rib, like I'd seen some of the Spencer Tracy ones. So Bringing Up Baby was one I'd seen later. When I saw Bringing Up Baby, it was a little like, who is she? Like, I just wasn't ready for that performance, because I think of my Katharine Hepburn roles as more of a dry intellectual sort of character. So when I see this character of, remind me the name from Bringing Up Baby, because spoiler alert, this is the one that I didn't really take to. And it's so crazy because everything should be up my alley about this movie. And it just was,
Susan.
It was Susan. Thank you.
Sorry.
Susan was not the tea for me. It was just a real different character than what I was used to seeing her. So I couldn't jump all in, but my goodness, she is still so charming. Whenever she's on screen, she just really draws your attention, draws your eye. Like, she's got the charisma down.
I feel like my journey with Katharine Hepburn is almost the complete opposite, because like I was saying, this was the first time I had seen her. So like when I think of her, I think of this movie, and it's more how I've watched other movies where it's like, oh wow, she's just incredibly talented. Like, she can do multiple different kinds of genres. But no, I love this character. I love the like frenetic energy that she brings, and I definitely feel like it's DNA of the manic pixie dream
girl. She is the start of that trope for sure, because she is just going through life doing what she wants, and everything else just has to fall into place. And it's really funny because she's not stupid, and I felt like not right when I'm watching this. I'm like, she's not an idiot. She's still a smart character. It's just her perspective and her way through the world is very different. So she still has intelligence there. It's just not in a academic sort of way it feels. It feels like it's very... One of my favorite quotes is from The Great Gatsby, and the character of Jordan Baker, she's not a good driver, but she's like, it takes two to make an accident. And I feel like that is what Susan is very much. It's like, as long as I'm doing what I want, everyone else sort of has to go about their way around me. That's the kind of energy it gives me. But that's part of the great gender dynamics and the part of the foil of Cary Grant's character to it.
I feel like Susan's character, she very much is living in the present. And that could be like a negative and a positive thing, where like I think she doesn't maybe think things through, because she's a little self-centered too, for sure. So I think kind of the mixture of that, I can see her maybe not being a likable character, but I don't know, just the charisma, as you said earlier, she just nails it. When she's on screen, I'm just like enamored, and I'm like, I love this kind of crazy energy that she brings to that movie.
I definitely think of the scenes at the club, like when she's getting into her car, you know, and it's like, but this isn't your car, and like just everything works out for her. It's very that, or just that misunderstanding that is the center of the screwball comedy of when she's like on the phone talking about baby and just the. Anytime the cat's on screen as well, though, I'm like, yes, the cat. I'll tell you why I couldn't fully jump in this movie is that freaking dog. That dog yaps so much, and this is again, it reminded me of my experience with Petite Maman, is when now that I'm watching it, I was watching it with headphones in, and when you've just got this yap in your ear the whole time, it was grating. It was so grating to me, and it was about halfway through the movie, and I'm like, I'm really ready for this just to be done. It was one of those ones for me, and it's not on the base of the performances at all. It was just, it's just not the one for me. It just doesn't engage me.
That's completely fair, because to be honest, I forgot about the dog. Like I completely forgot about the dog character, and I felt the same way, but I just love all the rest that I kind of just didn't care as much. Also, just fun fact, the dog is the same dog in the Thin Man series, which was kind of cool.
We love some Hollywood bros, some Hollywood animal royalty. I find it very interesting of the time, and one of the reasons I want to talk about it as well. And I'm watching it as a more, what I would like to think, a more developed movie watcher. I've got more critique on it, and just knowing a bit more of history and trying to take that into the context of it all. I find it really interesting that in the 1930s, when we're coming out of the Roaring 20s and into the Great Depression, that these are comedies. I can picture, now that I'm watching it, and I was watching it for the show, I'm picturing myself what it would have been like in the 30s to sit in a packed theatre. If you had a little bit of change and were able to go to the theatre and take in, and it would have been living vicariously through these characters. And I think it's really interesting that we see these characters of means and wealth, because that's not really reflective of what was happening at the time. And I think comedies nowadays are more reflective. We get more realistic female characters. What I like about screwball comedies is it takes me into the fantasy of it all, the fantasy of living through these women, and that a lot of the humor was just how not in touch they were. Claudette Colbert's character in It Happened One Night gives me very Princess Jasmine when I'm watching this. I'm like, this is Aladdin down. Like running away from feeling trapped in your family. I get that part, but she obviously does not know how to live in the real world, what the value of money is. Like Clark Gable's character is really having to take her through that, because she's ready to starve, but when she faces the realities of that, of eating raw carrots, which cracks me up because that's my breakfast, like every morning at work is like I'm eating a raw carrot for brekkie. And her face was just like, not cooked. I'm like, bitch, get into it. Like, it's great.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the world during this time period, it's like we're going into World War II, the Great Depression, the state of the world isn't great. Films kind of reflected at this time with screwball comedies. Yeah, it has this like fantasy, as you said, of the rich. The way of escapism back then was seeing the opulence.
opulence
of these different characters. And also, I do find it to be somewhat of a political statement of like poking fun at the rich too, kind of making them seem ridiculous and like the things that kind of occur in these movies. And anytime you enter into a relationship and there's money involved, that definitely can mix things up and kind of cause some tension. So it's almost like a plot device too, having somebody super wealthy.
Absolutely it is, because we see that in Happen One Night, where she doesn't believe that here's our big misunderstanding is that he's gone to write the story to be with her, and she thinks she's abandoned him, and then she thinks that he only wants her for the reward. And I really do enjoy that we twist that on the head, where he's like, no, I only want my $40. That's what I paid on her. It's the principle. So you're right. It is a part of that dynamic between the two. And even My Man Godfrey, the start of that movie sucks me in every time, where they're on this scavenger hunt. And I said to you, I'm like, you can tell why Amy Sherman-Palladino loves it. Like the DNA for Gilmore Girls and Mrs. Maisel's in there from the get. And I think I can see a lot of Lorelai Gilmore in a mixture of all of these characters as well, of just going through life and just the
My brain is a wild jungle full of scary gibberish. I'm writing a letter. I can't write a letter. Why can't I write a letter? I'm wearing a green dress. I wish I was wearing my blue dress. My blue dress is at the cleaners. The Germans wore gray. You wore blue. Casablanca. Casablanca's such a good movie. Casablanca, the White House, Bush. Why don't I drive a hybrid car? I should really drive a hybrid car. I should really take my bicycle to work. Bicycle, unicycle, unitard, hockey puck, rattlesnake, monkey, underpants.
sense of humor, I think, comes a lot through a lot of these. But the start of that movie is that they're trying to they're on a scavenger hunt. And if that doesn't just tell you like about the rich in that moment as well, I'm looking for a forgotten man. So I find that really interesting, that that's the start of it all. And the back and forth with Cornelia. Cornelia is such a great character. That is her name. Please tell me that's her name. That's the sister, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I enjoy her character so very much. Even the mum, like just being so Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice to me, like just off on her own world doing her own thing. But you're seeing all these different personalities that mix in this house, and Godfrey being the straight man. I think a lot of the humor sort of comes from that as well. So the screwballness comes from everyone's reactions to him. So I think of that one as my most favorite example from the genre, because I think it takes everything and is the best version of it all. As we sort of said, it's really interesting that we get these gender dynamics of these women that are sort of going about on their own pace, like they've got the money and they are just more entertaining themselves. It sometimes comes across. The male characters I find really interesting as well, like the love interests, because they tend to be either very academic. So we see Cary Grant's character, and it's very like this, it's very the stereotype of like the bumbling sort of person who can't interact and is just being bewildered by this woman, it feels. And then we have Godfrey and we have Peter Warne, who are very steadfast. So it gives the other people a lot of room to play off of. I find one example that's not in our ones, but kept popping into my brain as I'm thinking about this. Have you seen The Lady Eve with Barbara Stanwyck?
Yes.
So that one I find really interesting, because she's the con woman, and she's the one sort of coming in and being in the control of power, and he's the one that doesn't know that he's being had. So I find all the different ways that we're playing with influence and power. I find all that really interesting of the time, and how those sort of dynamics are really emblematic of the comedy genre and how that opens it up for humor, because I find her really captivating throughout the film. And she's sort of the antithesis to a lot of the three female characters that we've been talking about so far, because she is so in control the whole time and sly and just really fun to watch. Mel, we love our classics. Anytime that RKO sort of starts at the beginning, or the Paramount comes up in the black and white, and it's even a little bit crinkly because it happened one night. As you sort of said, being 90 years is such a feat, but it definitely does when you're watching it. It gives you that little bit of background sound sometimes, or maybe it's just because I'm watching with headphones, like I noticed a bit more. It is just still so much a product of its time, which is amazing. You've just got this fantastic cinematography, analytical eye, and being able to put yourself behind the camera. How do you find that the constriction of it being black and white sort of emphasizes the comedy?
I think with these films being in black and white, which actually really quick, for whatever reason, it was very difficult for me to find My Man Godfrey in black and white. There's all these like colorized versions that were like being advertised to me, and I was like, no, give me the black and white.
That's not what I want. It's like It's a Wonderful Life. You have to watch it in black and white.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think the black and white cinematography very much gives the focus to the dialogue, which again, that's like a highlight to these movies is the wit, the fast-paced dialogue, and I think that definitely gives it its focus because it's a black and white cinematography, but also just like the different uses of like light and shadows and things like that to kind of emphasize different scenes and emphasize the comedy of it all. Like the scene we were kind of talking about earlier with Carol Lombard with her dramatics, like it's very like focused and like just the lighting of it all is very dramatic. It really adds to the comedy of that scene, and also to like not even just comedy, but like the romance of it all. Like, oh my gosh, in It Happened One Night, like the scenes where they're sleeping in the hay, it's like just the focus of it all. Like it adds this like romance kind of vibe with like the natural lighting. I particularly feel like in regards to these three films, It Happened One Night was the one that stands out to me in regards to the cinematography.
I very much think the same. When you have black and white, you need to think about how you're staging and blocking scenes very much as well. So I think that comes through. And as you sort of said, you need to have emphasis on character and have emphasis on dialogue. And you need a lot of those beautiful close-up shots. And sometimes I do sort of think like we love our costumes. I'm like, how hard it would be that you need to film things that, you know, show up in the black and white and look interesting and intricate and difficult. So I think the scene you mentioned with Carol Lombard as Irene and the veil and the extraness of it all, you've got to think about the way you're shooting that. And definitely Frank Capra nails it with the directing for It Happened One Night. Even just scenes like Claudette Colbert sticking her leg out to do the hitchhiking would look great in colour, but something about the black and white old-timiness of it all with just sticking a bit of leg out, and what a hussy move that is, and I live it. I love it. It's great. Just even those sorts of things add to making you feel it is of the time, because I was watching It Happen One Night and it gave me very much that feeling of Seinfeld couldn't happen nowadays because everyone has mobile phones and you would just know where everyone is at the time, and that's very this as well. Like this, you couldn't do anything close to this nowadays. It has to live in that road trip feeling of it all and staying overnight in the places. It brings my enjoyment of it, and the comedy heightens through just making, again, feel like I'm part of the world, feeling like I'm part of the fantasy. Even just things like the Wall of Jericho and the sheet and how it ends. I think you wouldn't see things like that nowadays because you're not restricted by any means. So it's not making you push creatively as much as you sort of maybe had to back then.
Another scene that really stands out to me, and you had mentioned it too, My Man Godfrey, just that beginning sequence really, really pulled me in. And I like how kind of gritty and dark it is when we first meet Godfrey. He's this homeless man, and it's kind of dark and gloomy, versus like once we get to the Bullock's house, it's very like bright, and just that contrast of, again, the wealth disparity of it all. And also the way that they look at each other in that beginning scene, I was like, okay, there's the love story. Like, I see you. I really liked their chemistry, even just right at the start of the film.
You talked about like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl sort of trope. That I feel like that comes through very much at the end of that movie as well, with the wedding when she just like brings her bags in. That is so funny to me, when she brings her bags into his office and it's like, you're going to be the witness and you're going to marry us. And I think even the ending line is like, it'll be over soon, Godfrey. And he just has to stand there and take it.
Stand still, Godfrey. It'll all be over in a minute.
It's so funny. The black and white cinematography of it plays because you have to be on that one set. You know, you're in that one set of the dump, or you're in that one set of the beautiful house, or even for It Happened One Night, as you sort of mentioned, like you're on a bus for a lot of it. So you need to be engaging and your performances need to be that little bit extra. Speaking of comedy-wise, we chose this and it lives very much, as we sort of mentioned, I think we picked 33, 34 for It Happened One Night, 36 for My Man Godfrey, and 38 for Bringing Up Baby. So we've picked everything from the 30s era. Mel, why do you think we sort of moved on from a lot of screwball comedies? Because the only modern one I can think of is What's Up, Doc, with Barbra Streisand in the 70s, which my lovely friend Clay recommended to me. And that is very a love letter to the genre. Why do you think we don't see many of these anymore?
I mean, I think a huge thing with screwball comedies and kind of this time period was the Hays Code, which we haven't really talked about yet, but like that very much kind of pushed all this. Like you were saying, as scriptwriters, they kind of had to get creative because it's like we can't be as maybe sexual as we want to. So they kind of had to do these creative ways of the script and the tension and all these different things. I think it didn't really live on because once the Hays Code was not a thing anymore, and just as film progressed, our comedies did turn into more raunchy sex comedies and sex sells. So I feel like the history of like comedy, that's just like the direction it eventually went in. But I will say, I do think there's sprinkles of it in different iterations in modern cinema or TV. Like you had mentioned Gilmore Girls. That was definitely something I had thought about rewatching these. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much Gilmore Girls DNA here. Like another one I thought of was Raising Arizona.
I
feel like a lot of the Coen brother films actually do have screwball elements to it. So that's definitely like more of a modern one that came to mind for me. But then like I really got to thinking of it and I'm just like, well, I mean, just romantic comedies in general definitely take from all this. It's kind of morphed and changed, you know, through the years. But yeah, I haven't seen What's Up, Doc. That's on my list of like ones to see as like a more modern example.
It's very much the academic man and this woman who you're going to watch and go, this is my Man Godfrey of the 70s, because it's like this woman who just comes in and is like, we're meant to be together and I'm going to make it happen. And things happen to him. You know, he's not involved. He doesn't have any agency. It's like she has all the agency and she's the one making it all happen. And those other sort of tropes of there's suitcases that get mixed around and misunderstandings and it's a lot of that and a lot of missed opportunities, like people crossing paths and that sort of deal. And Madeline Kahn is in it and she is, well, I was thinking about that and I'm like, why I didn't have her as my number one when we did female comedic performances, like bad Kelly, because Alan and I do Young Frankenstein all the time with elbows. It's like tap for the darling. We go, huh.
Goodbye, darling.
Goodbye, Freddie.
I love what you're saying about the Hays Code because I actually really hadn't even thought of that. But of course, that is just such a major influence and the studio system and what's happening. Because I think Bringing Up Baby, please let me know in your notes, is this after Katharine Hepburn got labelled as box office poison and this was her big comeback? That's ringing.
I don't know for sure. I can fact check myself in post or fact check ourselves in post. I don't remember.
Because I found it really interesting and sort of like why some actors and actresses were maybe drawn to the genre. But you're right. We got replaced with maybe more raunchy comedies or just more rom-coms got into a set formula, I think, that is derived from this, but don't get labelled as that. So I find it interesting why we don't sort of label those sorts of things anymore, why this terminology lives and dies in this period.
I think certain actors or directors were drawn to this genre because of creative freedom a little bit. I mean, to a certain degree, obviously the Hays Code, but like, I think there was this kind of challenge to be creative based on that. And then also to like showcase different talents too. Like it's not one that we watched necessarily for the episode, but one that was coming to mind was A Holiday, because Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant do some crazy like gymnastics and like, again, that physical comedy of it all. And that's just something that I think is very much showcased in a lot of these films. It also seems like it was a very like collaborative environment. One of the facts that I found out was production was delayed on Bringing Up Baby because Hepburn and Grant, they kept laughing a lot, which caused like delays in filming. And that just sounds really fun. So I could see why maybe people were interested in it because if you're laughing so hard it's delaying production, that sounds like a pretty good time. And I also did want to shout out to, for My Man Godfrey and Bring Up Baby, both films had female writers attached, Zoe Atkins and Hadgar Wild, which I thought was really cool. Not something you would typically see in the 1930s.
I love that you bring up Grant and Hepburn in Holiday. That's one, I like that over Bringing Up Baby. I like a lot of the Lubitsch works. I think, it is interesting why I think Cary Grant, I never think of him as a comedic actor, but he's in some of my favorite comedies of the time and works so well with Capra. So like, I think of Arsenic and Old Lace, and I think of like Howard Hawks and His Girl Friday. I think a lot of that time, he's just got great physical comedy beats. So it's really interesting who he gets paired with. I think sort of makes the film what it is in a sense. Like, he's just such a great straight man. It's whoever's going to be the love interest sort of informs how the movie develops and how that sort of chemistry really plays out. What I find interesting is you sort of said you had to be creative, and about the Hays Code and romance. Again, with the ending of It Happened One Night, how clever is it that you go back to the hotel and they put up the sheet and it's like all they asked for was a horn, and you just hear the horn play and you see the sheet drop, because like that's code for their fucking. Like, there's no ifs or buts about it. Like, they are getting down. And so what like a great ending in the way that you play that romance off. And I think, again, that's that restriction making comedy gold from it there. So I wonder if, because sometimes when you have free reign to do anything, it's hard to nail it down. But when you have a set task, maybe nowadays, you can do pretty much anything sort of goes. And it's really interesting to see what hits and misses, and maybe why we don't have screwball comedies as much, is because there's not that either room to play within the genre, or as I sort of mentioned, it's hard to do those sorts of stories nowadays because it's just not as believable. It's harder to do those misunderstandings. It's harder to make those sorts of characters believable. It's interesting.
I feel like if I lived in the 1930s, I think I'd have the biggest crush on Cary Grant, because he's in some of my favorite movies, and like he's very charming, and I love him in the movies we picked today and I've talked about so far. Definitely Arsenic and Old Lace, especially. Love that one.
Cary Grant and Clark Gable are like up there for me. Michael says I have a white old dude fetish. Like, I've got something for that. Like, they're just so peak. And again, it's the black and white. Like, the features just come through. They are handsome men.
I completely agree about Clark Gable. I haven't even talked about him yet. Yeah, there's something about him that is just like pure sexy. It's happening.
The hair, the thin mustache, when he's eating the carrots and he's like the prototype for Bugs Bunny. Again, when you don't realize that until you watch it, this is why you need to do your film history, because you're like, oh my goodness, The Simpsons and Looney Tunes took from everything classic.
I'm curious, was there any screwball comedies that you have added to your watch list through this preparation of this episode?
No. But only because I was so focused on the ones that we're talking about, and because The Lady Eve and What's Up Doc also really kept pushing to the forefront of my brain. Please tell me what you've added, because this is one that I haven't really looked into. Again, like a Manic Pixie Dream Girl, I have just let it happen to me. I've just gone through being willy-nilly and deciding on a whim what I would like to watch and what I would like to go through. So please tell me what you've added to your list, because I will add it to mine.
Yeah, the ones that were catching my eye that I've not seen is The Smiling Lieutenant, What's Up Doc, which we talked about that one already, To Be or Not to Be, which is with Carol Lombard.
Yes,
that one was like, it looked like it was highly rated and she was in it. And again, I want to seek out more of her movies. And then Design for Living seems really interesting. I don't know if you know kind of what the premises of that one. Oh, you've seen it? Okay.
I've seen it. That's a 4-star for me. I very, very enjoy that movie. It is not what I would call a screwball comedy, because in my opinion, it's more dramedy. Okay. It got a lot. There is great humor there, and the performances are top notch. But I think it got a lot more serious than I thought. I think that is a movie that would play well nowadays. It's a dramedy to me. It really toes the line between both of them. But yes, I think you would like that movie. That is a good movie.
Anyone watching, if you have recommendations for screwball comedies, or like tell us what your favorites are, please let us know, because this is definitely a genre I want to explore more of. Like, I had a lot of fun rewatching/watching my Man Godfrey for the first time, but rewatching It Happened One Night and Bringing Up Baby. But like, yeah, I feel like I've only touched the surface kind of with screwball comedies. I feel like there's just so much out there that I haven't even heard of, or please let us know.
Absolutely. I remember when we did the Judy Garland episode, we had fantastic comments and recommendations for that. So we do read it, we take it in, we add it to the watch list. Melissa gets to it in time. I'm fussy. But that's okay. So please, yes, give us your top screwball comedies. And again, if there's anything that you think has lived outside of the genre or like is directly inspired by it, that's also the sort of stuff that we really want to see. Melissa, it's just been so much fun talking comedies with you, doing the yuck yucks. I love it. Please tell people where they can find us.
You can find us all over. We're on X, Instagram, TikTok, and then here, of course. So if you're new here, please subscribe. Just tune in for more. And until next time, everyone, stay magical.